Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, welcome to another episode of the Jake Botel Sports Experience, the podcast that cannot be killed. We are into the third or fourth reboot of it, and we're also into our NFC East division preview. We've done all the AFC teams. We've done the NFC North just a few days ago, so if you want to check those out and get up to speed, make sure you head on over and have a look and a listen at those. When I talk about we, I talk about, of course, myself, one and only Minnesota Jack, and the great Oakland human himself, Mr. David Vaughan. How are we, fellas?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
I'm awake.
Things
are
existing.
Yes. Existence is key.
Absolutely. We are both existing and podcasting. And as I said today, the NFC East, the way this works, we've divvied up the teams. We each take one or two in my case, and we give a little preview. We give you a little cheat sheet about what happened for them last year, their off season, and our big sort of question marks and thoughts about them this season. And then we have a bit of a discussion to predict the division standings. I'm going to lead us off with the New York Football Giants. A soaring rookie campaign under Brian Daboll in 2022. They go to the playoffs. They win a playoff game. Oh, it was followed by an absolute wet fart of a season in 2023. A 6-11 record, and that was after a 2-8 start. They finished the season, though, with a crushing 27-10 win over the Philly Eagles, which would have made them feel very good. Obviously, injury to Daniel Jones after just 5 games really didn't help keep the train on the rails, but the run game took a significant step back from top 10 areas to middling in 2023, and the passing attack suffered along with it. Just 15 passing touchdowns and 12 interceptions to go with less than 3,000 passing yards in 2023. They were an eyesore in 2023, the Giants. There's a bit of change during the offseason. Safety Xavier McKinney is off to the Packers on a 4-year deal. Quarterback 2, Tyrod Taylor, off to crosstown rivals, the Jets. Former first-round pick. This one was one that would have really stung. Running back Saquon Barkley departing to the much-hated Philadelphia Eagles on a 3-year deal. There was, I think, a clip of John Mara, or one of the Maras, in the Hard Knocks preseason documentary or off-season documentary. I think it was him saying, at least one of the Giants front office staff saying, under no circumstances, I do not want to see Saquon in a Philly uniform. And then, of course, that's what we've got. They release offensive guard Mark Lewinsky after his snap count dwindled in the second year of his contract with Big Blue. They bring Drew Lock in as quarterback 2. Running back Devin Singletary in from the Bills. Offensive tackle Jermaine Illuminor from Vegas. And offensive guard John Runyon from the Green Bay Packers. The biggest signings, really, probably defensive end Brian Burns from Carolina. He had 246 tackles and 46 sacks in 5 years at the Panthers. They draft LSU wide receiver Malik Neighbors in the first round with pick number 6. He had 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns in 2023. My big question over the Giants this season is, was that 2022 Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll team up real life or just fantasy? Are the Giants caught in a landslide with no escape from reality? This team was one of the very worst watches last season on both sides of the ball. The offense couldn't throw. The defense couldn't stop the run. It's a big, big year for Daniel Jones. They all seem to have been big, big years for Daniel Jones, really. He's got a beard. He's looking, much more, hubba. If they have another stinker of a year, I'd think they would let Brian Daboll draft his own guy. Like, if they have a bad year or Jones gets injured again, I almost feel like they might move on and say to Brian Daboll, look, you've got a draft and 2025 season to show a proof of concept of you with your own choice of quarterback. But who knows? If it went really bad, it's sometimes hard to predict the New York teams. They could just blow it all up. Is 2022 repeatable, or was it an anomaly? I just don't know at this point in time. with the Giants, and it's going to be fascinating to see what they can manufacture in 2024. David, I'll punt the ball to you to talk about the Dallas Cowboys, if you will. Like talk about opposite ends of the spectrum in 2023. The Giants and the Cowboys.
Way too labored of a segue. But no, so kind of putting a capstone on what you were saying with the Giants. I think a lot of what happens with the Giants, in division and things like that, especially, is going to have to do with what happens with the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys, coming off a 12-5 record, the NFC East champions, and then in what has become sadly typical fashion, bowed out in the first round of the playoffs, 48-32 loss to Green Bay at home. And it wasn't even that close. I mean, they just got outplayed in absolutely every facet of that game. The Cowboys lost a ton of talent in the offseason too. They lost the Pro Bowl offensive lineman, Tyron Smith. They lost Tyler Biadasz. They lost their two-time 1,000-yard rusher, Tony Pollard. Stephon Gilmore's gone. Durant Armstrong is gone. Dante Fowler Jr. is gone. And Leighton Vander Esch was forced into retirement. That team is not – I mean, they lost a lot, and they didn't replace it with anything for a no-holds-barred offseason, or what was the word that Jerry Jones used about it? Was going to it wasn't like take no prisoners, but it was like something like that. That just led everyone to believe that they were going to have this firestorm of an offseason, and they didn't do anything except hemorrhage players.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was as a fan of the league, it was uninspiring. I feel like as a fan of the Cowboys, I feel like it would just be disappointing or devastating. The best move that they made was hiring Mike Zimmer as their defensive coordinator. That was the best thing they did. They have just gaping holes across their roster right now. And they have not locked in Dak Prescott. They have not locked in CeeDee Lamb. They have not made the moves that they needed to make to even maintain. And this Cowboys fan, and so I've been following the NFL long enough to know that the NFL is better when the Dallas Cowboys are good. When the Cowboys are good, it's better for the league. And much like I would imagine in a lot of different leagues, like in baseball is better when the Yankees are good because you kind of have that good, evil dynasty. I imagine, hand passing it over to you guys. When Collingwood is good, the AFL is better. It's better for the league when they are good. Well, I'm not saying that you have to like them, but I'm just saying it's better for the league when they're good because you have like kind of that one name that is up there and recognizable. That's the Dallas Cowboys here, and y'all, they're not there. And I feel like there's going to be a pretty drastic drop off with this team this year. I don't think they're going to be 500. I don't.
Ooh. Okay.
And they may go from first to worst in the division. They've lost so much. They did nothing to replace it. And their superstars are not happy and not locked up.
So just a typical Dallas Cowboys sort of situation. The last few seasons, my God.
I mean, I don't know that this is typical though, even for the Cowboys. This is not. This is different, and you do at some point kind of have to start asking yourself, if you're a Cowboys fan, has Jerry lost it? Because I mean, this is not. It's almost like they're not even trying to make moves, And I don't know if it's a matter of they're just being shot down, like people don't want to go to Dallas, or what. But this has been as nightmarish of an offseason, I think, as you can have in the NFL. It's been pretty bad. They lost so much talent. They didn't get much for it in return. And the talent that they do have is a foot out the door.
It's kind of crazy. Like, there's so much uncertainty and instability. Like, even I feel like both, it must be a tough environment to go and play in when things aren't going well, because the ownership is so vocal, and like, as I imagine, like, as the head coach and as the starting quarterback, like, I don't know, Mike McCarthy seems to be like skating on thin ice since the moment he walked in the door. It's kind of terrifying. It's like one of those weird, like, like a sort of romantic comedy. When the boyfriend is trying to win over the father-in-law, and the father-in-law is like, Robert De Niro or something. That's kind of what Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy dynamic feels like. It's like, so when you're going to get us that Super Bowl, Mike? I think there's a lot of question marks. But then there was kind of a lot of question marks over, I think, heading into this offseason for the two biggest teams in the division. Do you want to chat Eagles?
Yeah, well, they're another interesting case, and it's funny they're both in the same division. I mean, looking at Philly last year, I mean, that was a season of two halves if we've ever seen one.
Was it ever?
The Eagles made it to Week 12 at an astounding record of 10 wins, 1 loss. They were far from a perfect team. They had weaknesses in the defense, and they had sort of an inability to put teams away. But they were in the driver's seat of the NFC and had done mostly everything right to get there. But they ended the year at 11-7, showcasing how badly a drop-off this team suffered. And they were embarrassed by the feisty Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a playoff loss to the tune of 9-32. So really couldn't have had two more opposite sort of halves of a season. And interestingly, sort of looking into Philly going into 2024, not much has changed when it comes to player acquisitions and players leaving and coming and going, beyond veteran center Jason Kelce retiring from the league. However, going back-to-back draft picks going to cornerbacks, grabbing Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, shows that the GM doesn't want the same sort of defensive weaknesses as last year. And I think it wasn't just the defense. I think it was the secondary for Philly that was just getting torched week in and week out, especially in that sort of second half of the year. Now, for me, the big question for Philadelphia is, which team are we going to see? Are we going to see the 10-1 team that looked all but certain to go to the Super Bowl? Or are we going to see the 1-6 team that gave up points left, right, and center? And attached to that, are quarterback Jalen Hurts and head coach Nick Sirianni going to squash whatever beef they had going on last year that might have led to last year's downfall? And speaking of Jalen Hurts, interesting to note that we think of him as this like scrambling quarterback that picks up yards on the ground and is sort of a bit of a battering ram. That was not the case last year. When he was sort of really in that Super Bowl year, that was his strength. We really didn't see that last year. And so that'll be an interesting thing to track this year to see how does he get back to that? Do we see the Jalen Hurts of that Super Bowl year where he really sort of stands above everyone else? I mean, he, went toe-to-toe with Mahomes in the Super Bowl, arguably played a better game than Mahomes in that Super Bowl. Or are we going to see more? It's going to be a big year for Jalen Hurts, really, I think, more than anyone in that organization, because I feel like this will show us what kind of quarterback he is. Was that year an outlier, or was that year sort of more indicative of who he is as a quarterback?
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at like his yards, like rushing at 605 yards and 15 touchdowns, but it was at 3.9 yards per attempt. I don't think it was as explosive on the ground. The passing game really suffered. Like, just a couple of stats to back you up on what you're saying. He had 538 attempts as career high. Through for 3,800 yards, but 23 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. The 15 interceptions part is the bit that was probably concerning. And I seem to sort of remember games where things would just sort of, he would throw it away kind of thing. Like, as in it would just, there were inexplicable turnovers.
It was almost like he was forcing himself to be a pocket passer, which isn't who he is. He was kind of putting this pressure on himself to not be the sort of scrambler, improviser quarterback and just to sit in the pocket. And that just didn't really work out well for him because he didn't seem to be able to read the coverage that well and was throwing picks left, right, and center. And I think it's that classic thing with a lot of, American football. When you do one thing more, you open up opportunities in other areas. So if you start running the ball more, defenses have to account for that. That opens up passing opportunities.
Yeah.
But he sort of became one note, and I think defenses really attacked that.
It's so crazy to think that they dropped off almost perfectly in line. And this sounds so stupid. But when that incident with the security guard,
Yeah.
the sideline guy where they had the thing, and I can't remember his name. It was like Big Joe or something. There was like a nickname for him. And the rumors were that he was on the sideline to help Nick Sirianni basically keep his cool and to keep things in check. He wasn't allowed on the sidelines after that, and they crumbled. And that it could be just pure coincidence, but it was weird that after that moment, that was sort of when they began their slide.
It's so true. You go, David.
I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, wasn't it the next game after that was the last one that they won, wasn't it?
It was something like that. Yeah.
They won the next game and then they didn't win again. No, I hadn't put that together, but I mean that makes sense, especially if his kind of primary function outside of security was to keep the coach cool.
That was at least what was sort of being bandied about in different like little reports and podcasts was that there was definitely a function he served on the sideline. I'm going to spin us into our final team and then we can sort of break down our general thoughts and where we're going to put teams and why. I'm going to talk about the Washington Commanders. They started out last season 3-3, and then the wheels fell off and the whole wagon collapsed. They ended 4-13. It was a record that saw the Commies punt on head coach Ron Rivera. Defense was meant to be his cornerstone, and their defense was abysmal. They were last in passing yards and passing touchdowns allowed, and they were not a whole lot better in the run defense. They conceded 30 or more points in 10 games and 35 or more in 6 of those. There's a bit of rotation that goes on in the offseason. Obviously, Ron Rivera's out, but they acquired Dan Quinn, who gets a second chance at being a head coach after coordinating the Cowboys defense last few seasons. I guess that's a point to think back to the Cowboys as well, that not only have they lost some players, they've lost one of the key minds behind what they were doing. The quarterback room gets an overhaul. Sam Howell off to the Seahawks. Jacoby Brissett back to the Patriots. Wide receiver Curtis Samuel is to the Bills. The secondary gets a little bit raided as Miami takes cornerback Kendall Fuller and safety Cameron Curl. They add experienced Seahawks linebacker Bobby Wagner, who would have worked with Dan Quinn in Seattle when Quinn was the DC there. They add linebacker Frankie Louvu and safety Jeremy Chin from Carolina. Running back Austin Eckler arrives from the Chargers. Tyler Biadasz, as David just said, he left the Cowboys and went to the Commanders. There's been a lot of players flip teams in division this season. Patrick Queen from the Ravens to the Steelers. There's been a bit of that going on. The Commanders reset, though, it really starts and ends with LSU's Heisman-winning quarterback, Jayden Daniels. 4 middling kind of seasons at Arizona State and LSU before breaking out in 2023. He had 3,800 passing yards, 40 touchdowns passing, and just 4 picks, as well as running for over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. Big question for me. Are Dan Quinn and offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury the right guys to get the most out of their quarterback and this whole reset at Washington? Now, Dan Quinn took the Falcons to a Super Bowl.
We remember.
28-3. Jayden Daniels is going to play year 1, obviously. I hope there's not an earthquake going on in Oklahoma. There, David scrambles for his
hot weather and an earthquake.
Yeah. That'd be just the pits. Jayden Daniels, he's going to play year 1. And my question will be, is he going to be helped or hindered by Kingsbury, who starts his next NFL chapter outside of the limelight of head coach? So can Dan Quinn make the defense good, let alone great? They've played far below their talent level under Ron Rivera. So I'm sort of looking at, can Dan Quinn remake this defense and strengthen it enough to ease the pressure on their fledgling QB, who hopefully gets some decent schematic support from Cliff Kingsbury, who had that extended sojourn in, was it Thailand or something like that? Yeah. What are your thoughts there, David? I see you were got something to add.
Right. So this is kind of what Coach Bro does. Like, he takes these quarterbacks that have the skill set that he has and just explodes them and makes them amazing. I mean, you've got Patrick Mahomes. You've got, just this list of quarterbacks that he did this with in college. He has experience with this. He was not able to do it with Kyler Murray, but you got to think, in Arizona, he was split many different ways. If he's just focused on the offense and just focused on making that tick, I think he can. I think he can take. Daniels, and I think that he can do something with him. My question is more on the receiving core and not so much on the backfield.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair question. I'm just gonna throw it out there as the conversation starter. I hadn't actually thought about how I was going to predict this division. And I've probably drunk the Kool-Aid a bit. I'm going to slot the Commanders as my number one team in this division this year.
Oh.
I think they might be a candidate. If with the Cowboys, David's sort of predicting a first to worst. I kind of feel like the Commanders could have a worst to first rise in them. If they, there's a lot of ifs and questions, but I feel like that's over this whole division. I don't know. I just feel like they could be something exciting. I like the connection of, Kingsbury just as OC, scheming things up with a guy like Daniels, who is super talented. I've just got a feeling too, new ownership in Washington, sort of a new era for this franchise. Yeah, I'm going to slot them at number one. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Well,
what do you think about the rest of the
sort
teams?
of just thinking on Washington in a weird roundabout way. Is there any concern that Jayden Daniels in that breakout year you're talking about has a ratio of 40 touchdowns to 4 picks? Is that not one of those things where actually that can sometimes be a bit of a worry? David's shaking head makes me feel like I don't have any idea what I'm talking about.
No.
You go.
No, I think. Sorry to interrupt. I don't think that those statistics necessarily cause concern. What it may do, though, is if he throws a couple picks in his first game, then it gets in his own head. I don't think any coordinator or coach is going to look at his college stats and be like, no, that's not. But I would worry more about how he handles, because it's going to happen. There's going to come a game where he throws a couple picks, and how's he going to respond to that? Does the 2 picks morph into 5, or does he overcome? Because in the NFL, that can happen. You could have a team get 5 takeaways in a game.
It's interesting because, the profile on him, I think I remember watching him play a bit for Arizona State when he was there. And I always sort of thought he kind of confounded me. He was so exciting, and then he was sort of just frustrating at the same time. Like, 2019, he played 12 games, completed 60% of his passes, 17 touchdowns, 2 picks. 2021, he plays 13 games, 10 touchdowns, 10 picks. He actually, outside of that one season in 2021, he actually has been very sort of protective of the football in the sense that if you take away those 10 interceptions in 2021, he only threw 10 in the rest of his college career. 2 in year 1 at Arizona State, 1 in year 2 at Arizona State, 3 and 4 in his 2 years at LSU. So he's kind of got this I don't know. We tend to think, I think a lot of people do, of him as this explosive kind of quarterback. Before LSU, he hadn't averaged over 10 yards per attempt at any point in his career. His career high was 8.7. So I wonder if, he can sort of actually take care of the football better than what maybe his reputation for a lot of people is going to say. Like, we think of him as this, running, threat who can move around, make plays, and maybe he's going to put the ball in danger. But he actually kind of took care of the football all right outside of that one season.
Well, and Jake, to that end, in college, you do tend to kind of rely more on explosive plays. In the NFL, they're quite content to take 6 yards an attempt. Because if you're getting 6 yards, that puts you second and short. So they're going to be quite content to take that. And what happens is you do tend to get these quarterbacks that have these massive arms that are averaging 18, 22 yards an attempt in college. And they get to the NFL and they can't. I mean, Zach Wilson. I mean, had some pretty gaudy numbers at BYU. It just didn't translate. And I think that shorter game, he knows already how to play that shorter game. Combine that then with Kingsbury. I just always call him Coach Bro. I almost did it out of habit. But combine him with Cliff Kingsbury, and I think we're going to see him really hone his craft. And I'm pretty bullish on the Commanders this year. I am.
So, all right. So there's reason at least two of us are fairly optimistic about the Commanders. I don't think you've got them winning the division.
No, but I think that they'll be. I would put them at 2. I'd feel pretty confident with that. I personally, and there's so much more that goes into football than this. But sometimes, what is it, like Occam's razor? Whatever's the simplest answer is the most likely one. I look at that sometimes with quarterbacks, and I go, if I don't really know which team has the best quarterback, and to me it's Jalen Hurts at Philly, and so I kind of trust that they will work it out enough in a division that I also am with David. I don't know necessarily if the Cowboys will be 4th, but I do think that they're going to see a massive drop-off and they're not going to be that competitive. I don't think the Giants are going to work it out. So it's really between Philly and Washington, and I think that I see Philadelphia putting together more wins than I do Washington. Washington, I reckon they'll be the kind of team that starts out pretty rough, and then they have a real hot streak as they work it out. Whereas Philadelphia, they just seem like they've got enough of it together, and there's too many unknowns with Washington. New coach, new ownership, new quarterback, all these things. Whereas Philadelphia, despite all of their issues in the second half of last year, there was the start of last year too. Yeah. And I trust that Jalen Hurts is a really talented quarterback and a real determined quarterback. And I can see him seething over how his team ended last year and is not going to let that happen again.
And unlike the Cowboys, who sometimes can look like a hot mess, at least in the time that I've been following the NFL, the Eagles have such a great track record of never allowing themselves to become terrible.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't yet seen them become a mess. I suppose that they reboot. They're fairly ruthless in how they will move on from a head coach like poor old
Doug Peterson.
Doug Peterson, a couple of seasons after you win a Super Bowl, you're gone. Carson Wentz, you're gone. Nick Foles, you're gone. They send players out really quick. And as David said, the Cowboys lost a lot and didn't replace it. Nothing much changed for the Eagles, but they added Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty good. How do we feel about Eagles 1, Commanders 2? Does that
fits for me?
I have Philadelphia winning the division comfortably. I think they'll win by multiple games. I don't think it's going to be close. I think that they could be like a 12-5, 13-4 type team. I think Washington ends up like 9-8. I've got Dallas at 8-9, and I think the Giants will be like 6-11.
I'm happy with that as the ranking.
Yeah,
Eagles,
works.
Commanders, Cowboys, Giants.
Yeah.
Just as a little extra thing, if Cowboys go 8-9, which of these pieces goes. Dak
I think
Prescott.
I think it's a fire sale.
Okay. Yeah. Total reboot.
Mm-hmm. I think what happens then is it turns back into the Quincy Carter Cowboys for a couple years, and they get pretty bad for a couple years, and then they're the Cowboys. They'll reboot. But I think if the Cowboys are sub 500 this year, I think that may be the end of Jerry Jones.
Do you think he'll hand over more running to his son? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think he'll be pressured out.
That'd be an interesting. I can't wait to watch that Netflix adaptation.
Oh, seriously.
I also think that there's a higher than you'd think likelihood that if either Dallas or Philadelphia goes kaput, that we see good old Billy Belichick coaching one of those teams. I think more likely Philadelphia than the Cowboys, just with ownership. But I thought that last season, and it didn't quite happen. But I'm holding on to it. I think that if either of those teams, particularly Philadelphia, if Philadelphia, remember they ended 1-6 that year. If they just continue that on, like you said, they will get rid of Sirianni. And looking at all the options that are available, Belichick's had a year off. I wouldn't put any money on it, but I have a strong suspicion that we're going to see Belichick go back and coach in this division somewhere.
I don't like Belichick Jerry Jones combo, but I do like Belichick Stephen Jones combo.
Okay.
Like I don't know what that ego clash would look like between Jerry and Bill. Like,
wouldn't quite work.
But I just wonder if maybe the younger Jones, kind of like we're talking about Dan Campbell, is he more a person who's prepared to not know what he doesn't know, sort of thing? And gosh, Belichick in charge of some of the talent that's on that Cowboys defense, particularly. Why can't I remember players' names today? They're pass rushing. Micah Parsons.
Yes.
Micah Parsons. Bill Belichick with Micah Parsons sort of throws you back to 90s Giants. Bill Belichick coordinating Lawrence Taylor.
And if there's one thing that might finally turn the conversation back in Belichick's favor between who's the GOAT, Belichick or Brady, he'd be going to somewhere like Dallas or Philadelphia and winning a Super Bowl with them. And I don't know if it's his driving factor, but I think that's something that still sits in the back of his head, that he ended his time in New England so poorly that no one is having that conversation anymore. Which was it? Was it Brady? Was it Belichick?
Well, I'll tell you, kind of going on that, you have to look at it. And for me, this one's a no-brainer. We talk about, Bill Belichick's relationship with ownership or the GMs. What do you think about Bill Belichick with Jalen Hurts versus Bill Belichick with Dak Prescott? I think Jalen Hurts would be the much better fit.
Yes. I actually think culturally and that sort of thing, Belichick on the sidelines in a cut-off Eagles hoodie is a much more, it does make a lot more sense. And I actually, if Sirianni doesn't get, like if he doesn't retain his position, if they go poorly, I actually would put money on Belichick being the one, because there were the rumors flying around, I think, last off season, that if they wanted to hit the reset button there, I could definitely see it. All right, so we've gone Eagles 1, we've gone the upstart Washington Commanders. I'm actually excited to watch them this season for some reason. Promising new quarterback.
You're a sicko, that's why.
I'm ready to get hurt all over again. The Cowboys at 3 and the Giants at 4, and that will obviously raise some interesting questions.
Despite the beard, they'll finish 4.
Yeah, despite Daniel Jones, impeccable. He looks like who's I'm trying to think. I can't think of any names. Like romance novelist. Is it Nicholas Sparks or something?
That's one of them, yeah.
Yeah, like he looks like he should be, in a cowboy hat on the front of Nicholas Sparks.
Holding his belt buckle.
Yeah, book to movie adaptation coming this summer. All right, that's it from us. We've done the NFC East. We will get back to you with the NFC South. That'll be an interesting one, actually. And the NFC West. one of the big powerhouse divisions, really, in all of football. We'll be back with those for you next week. But until next time, get some football up ya.